This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, or so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. Welcome back to the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with your host, David Charlton. Now, today's conversation is a fascinating one. It's about the element of mental toughness called learning orientation, essentially learning from mistakes so that you, as an athlete, can make better decisions on the pitch, course, court, or in the water. And for coaches to be able to make better decisions too, and empower their athletes too. So my guest, Mark Bennett, he's been on the show before in episode 42, which incidentally is one of our most popular episodes. Today we look at how you can learn from performances as an individual, how coaches can help their athletes learn from performances at an individual level, or certainly in individual sports, and at a team level as well. It's a fascinating conversation. I really hope you enjoy it. Hi, Mark. It's fantastic to have you back on the show. I know the episode we recorded, what will be probably 2 years ago now, was one of the most popular episodes. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing more of your insights. Firstly, do you want to just share a little bit more about your background so the listener can get to know you?
Yes, so we'll do the short version, David, but thanks for having me back on. It's always good when it's the most popular, whether it's popular because it's stimulating thought, agreement or disagreement, but it's stimulating something, isn't it? So it can't be a bad thing. Yes, so my background, the short version is in the early 90s, I was in the military and I just started to question the way we were developing recruits and soldiers. So I didn't know the answer, but I knew what I was doing wasn't really as effective as I believed it could be. So I went on an exploration journey, started to get a lot of things wrong, but actually started to identify things that started to work. So started to get success at self as more about developing people that can better make decisions live at self and with others, reflecting live, committing live, understanding actually how they can stay motivated and make good decisions unsupervised. And from a trainer, instructor, coach point of view, how you can influence people to be able to do that. So I got very good at doing it, but then I started to work with professional sports, Sale Sharks, Saracens, Warrington Wolves in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then I realized actually it's only going to work if I can pass what I'm seeing on to the coaches, because I was getting real good impact when I was with them. But then when I left, the coaches and some of the players were calling me and said, Mark, it's all gone back again. So it took another journey, I'd say 6 years to get my head around it. And then it's been evolving ever since. Is how can I develop a way that I can not just develop the buy-in, the value, the understanding with coaches, but also the adherence framework to shift the coaches' behaviors. So under pressure, they don't revert back to influence the athlete. So it started off as me looking at the recruit, and it's ended up actually looking at the influencers and how can I influence the influencers. So unsupervised, meaning once I've left, they can still make the best choices based on their judgment and competencies. That's really the short version. Done it in schools, pro sport, elite sport, international sport, in business, in leadership, in colleges and universities globally. So had some great success at Paralympic, Olympic level, but also in rough neighborhoods, in inner city schools, had great success with students there as well.
Great. Okay, so I've got a good few ideas now on where we take this based on what you've said. So this episode is simply going to be about learning orientation, an element of mental toughness. So learning from mistakes and from performances. Yeah. So could we look at the individual golfer to start with? You talked about live decision making there and live reflection, how you would go about helping the individual golfer, and then we can talk about how you would help the golf coach work with the individual golfer.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, isn't it, David? Because we've always got to understand when we're looking with the athlete, so if we're looking at golf for now, the reality is the coach is a huge influencer in how that athlete, that player makes a decision and reflects on the decision when they're playing golf. So one of the things that we've got to do is build a nice framework for the athlete to be able to have a better thought process that isn't emotionally driven, can control the environmental, but make better judgment and commit to that based on their capability in the moment, but also then reflect live and take the difference between the choice and the execution and the outcome and understand those differences. So obviously the coach needs to be better at not answering for the athlete. The first thing I do is teach, if we're looking at the teaching tools, is teach what I call the action review process. So often in golf, as an example, there's always been a lot of pre-shot routine, so much, but actually post-shot routine, not so much. So the action review process encompasses the whole element. So it's far beyond just an experiential learning cycle. It's actually giving them some frameworks to step through. And indeed, some athletes, they literally physically do a step forward each step so they can make the connection of, have I completed this step? Have I completed this? So if I went through it very quickly, David, then you can chunk in at any point. So there's steps to go through. First one is state. So am I present? Am I in an effective state? That's my first question. And then it's, understanding the athlete is what's my ideal self, or what's it look and feel like then? But state's the first one. The next one is scanning. So that's the collecting of data. So this is before I've made a decision, I need to look at all the data. So a golf trip up, if you're looking at a golf player, is they'll play a course they often know. They'll get to a certain hole, or the ball will be in a normal situation after the first shot, maybe. And without looking at all the data, they've already made a decision. They're already going, oh yeah, I'd use this club and this shot. So the scanning is, no, don't make a decision yet. What is all the data? And that could be environmental, of weather, but actually where are the hazards, the grass, whatever, where are the trees, where are the bunkers, where's the distance, but looking at all of it. Only then, once you've done that, the next step is look at all the options. So this is where I really build the future proofing, where I say, even if you can't do them yet, and yet being a key point, still look at all the options. So from where you are now, what are all the options? And the reason I do this is because if we can future proof the thinking, the game IQ, then actually we're always building them. So when their capability catches up, they're not blind to that as an option, because they'll always go to the one they built earlier on. So look at all options. And then the next one is okay, so what's going to influence your choice? So this is now where we start eliminating options based on the variables, which can be environmental, capability, situation. And actually sometimes with the players early on, I get them to verbalize all this out loud. So I wouldn't go for this option because, so they're qualifying, quantify, that's a no. I wouldn't go for this one because, and then they may be left with an obvious one, or there may be two. And if there's two, just go, okay, I'm choosing this one. This is the one I feel more comfortable or confident with. I'm going for this one. Once they've made the choice, then they commit to the choice. So then they go through their normal shot routine, which is the more common one, get over the ball, commit 100% without fear. Once they've completed the shot, then the first question always is did you commit? So if I did not commit, the conclusion is I haven't earned the right to review, because my conclusion is next time commit. And what that does, it stops them analyzing things that are pretty useless data because you didn't commit to the execution. So what you're reviewing is pretty nonsense anyway. So eliminate that. That's it. My conclusion is I did not commit. Next time I'm going to commit. If the answer is yes, I did commit, then we're looking at separately review the option and the execution. Now, that's quite different than obviously a lot of golfers, because a lot of golfers will see where the ball's gone, outcome, and then attempt to analyze, well, if the ball's gone there, what could it have been? And we know the problem with that is there's so many variables, their conclusion could be really false, inaccurate. But if we can get them to look at the choice and the execution separately, the conclusion might be right choice, right execution, just didn't come off, but actually I wouldn't change anything. It may be execution great, but actually it's the wrong choice. If I was to do that again, I'd go for this choice. So looking at that, and it may be poor execution, poor choice. But obviously when we get to there, is it the confidence actually you're just looking where the ball's gone, so you've said wrong choice, or actually have you done a meaningful analysis of that? Could you quantify that? But either way, there's the separation is there. Then the conclusion is, right, that's concluded. Next time done. Now I can walk away, I can chat, I can relax, whatever it is. So in golf, in essence, that's the action review process, David.
So what I like about that is really you're taking emotion out of it, aren't you? Where you expressed maybe a guy or a girl's got 165 yards and they decide, right, 8 irons the choice straight away, and that could be based on a past result, on the fact that they've done well on 2 or 3 holes ago. You're really, as we said, just ditching emotion and being very businesslike in some ways.
Yeah, and often with shots I'm not saying all, I'm generalizing here, but some players will go for the flashy shot, or the high risk shot, and you go, I'm in the rough here, I can curve it around there and get onto there. And actually you're saying, well, actually that's an option, but it's not the right option. So let's look at the data. Let's not shortcut any of it. And then if you don't shortcut it, when you stand over the ball, you've made a good choice based on judgment based on the data you have, based on your capability, stand over the ball and just back yourself. And also then, even if you're now in a situation that actually you're really struggling with, you've got used to the action review process. So it's not then a new skill because you do it every time. So you become more competent at working consistently through the same timing, same rhythm to get to a conclusion of action, then a conclusion of review. But you're closing the loop, but you're looking at all of the influencer elements, I like to call it. So it may be then, and we can link in later the coach, but the coach also can ask a player to verbalize that. The coach can now be listening and visualize, seeing, scanning themselves. So now they can see actually where was the source of the issue with the player. So it may be the scanning was the issue. So when the player started to verbalize, this is what I'm seeing, the coach is listening going, actually, you're missing something really important there. So now instead of getting caught up in working on their technical, the coach now recognizes, actually, the source was the scanning. Let's work on the scanning. So it's a win-win on both those.
Yeah, I find that fascinating. You talked there about I suppose the ego getting in the way, this whole task versus ego thing. And the flashy shot that sprung to mind. And then got about timing. The timing of the routine is, again, so essential, especially in a sport like golf, but often they won't even consider the timing aspect. It's just purely technical as the challenge in their eyes. So in terms of the post-shot routine, you mentioned there about the commitment being the key thing for them to go on. I'm just wondering what the buy-in is like from individuals.
When you talk about it, it's 100% buy-in. Because they go, that makes total sense, Mark. But then when you start to get them onto the course and whether you want to use it, obviously you can eliminate the environments initially. So, where's an easiest place for them to practice this to take away some of the stress? But even then early on, they'll go back to what they're used to. Now, we know traditionally a lot of players will be used to everything's about where the ball's gone. And where the ball's gone, they'll track back to be happy or unhappy with their shot. So there's a lot of emotional process from that. So to get someone to say, actually, as soon as that golf swing has ended the movement, say yes or no. Now, often in a driving range when practicing this, if we've found somebody that is actually so caught up in the ball, they're still trying to look for where the ball is before they say yes or no. We get them in the driving range and we put a sheet up that's waist height upwards. So therefore, the ball can go out, but they can't see where the ball's gone. The coach can, or another player when we partner them up. So now they have to review literally on what they did. So did I commit yes or no? It's got to be a yes or a no based on now the internal feel of that shot and not so much where the ball's gone. So there's so many barriers based on habits of the past. And often coaches, and I'm generalizing, but a lot of coaches haven't helped a player because the coach has been analyzing what's been going on by where the ball's gone, as opposed to, do I want to build the player up better self-awareness of what they're doing more than actually their conclusion is based on the outcome of the ball. So we've got some serious barriers that we have to build them, but we keep taking them back to, in the ideal world, you playing to your best, what would that look and feel like? And they go, no stress, being confident with my decision, playing the swing with confidence, with belief, not getting caught up emotionally. So if I totally agree. So what can allow you to do that? And they keep going back to, the action review process can really help me. And then we can start saying, okay, let's seek opportunities to practice it. So there are also elements in there of interventions where we can pre-agree players and coaches can do if they don't. We can use constraints in scoring example where actually your scoring will be based on your completion of the action review process more than where the ball's gone. If you complete the action review process, then you can use the score. So we can actually focus on the success of completing the action review process more than the 9-hole score on the card, if that makes sense.
Yeah, completely, because the biggest challenge for any golfer is, as you say, is the score. Then we've got the ball flight, then you've got the technical side as well, but it's very outcome focused, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I suppose another thing I've picked up on there would be, if this relates to the coach, a lot of coaches spend the vast majority of their time either on a range, in a room, and not necessarily a great deal of time on the golf course with people. However, I'm just wondering what your thoughts are with that.
It's always a challenge, isn't it? And I think technology although it's benefited golf in many ways, it's also been a hindrance to golf in many ways, because we draw them players back into the driving range where you've got, some machinery that can check the trajectory of the ball. You've got then a video analysis on you. And some coaches will get so caught up in the technical aspect and having the data they can view to see. What they're forgetting is, I'm not saying they will forget it, but the challenge is, the whole point of golf is actually making good judgment and executing it within the environment you play, which is obviously on your 18 holes on a golf course. So I always, with the coaches I work with, we always start with the baseline, and it's the same with any sport, but it will be, okay, let's now see 18 holes, walk around with them for the 18 holes, get them to verbalize what they're doing and seeing once you've seen it once. And so you can get your head around what they think is happening. And you're still, as a coach, giving no data at this point. You're just being inquisitive. You're just finding out, are you spotting trends? And then from that, then start agreeing where the source of a work on may be, give them the frameworks. But for me, it's always that, look, the driving range or anything else is a tool if you recognize that actually you need to put more focus to take away some of the environmental challenges. But as soon as you're thinking, right, I think I've got this, let's now go back on the course. And it's not always we have to start in the driving range. It's actually, if we've done something 2 days ago or yesterday, let's see if it's transferring onto the course. And that may be 9 holes, or, it may be we're recognizing you're great off the tee, but it's your short game. Well, let's do some work on the short game. Where can we do that? And we're still using the action review process. It's still working on that judgment. So it's very much about, like any sport, isn't it? Let's not separate it too much from where you're going to play, where we've taken away so many of the influencers that actually we're not practicing and building their strength and skill in dealing with the influences. So I still see a time and a place to break it down, but we've got to keep putting it back, and the coach has to see them. How are you transferring this to the 9 holes? Not let me know when you get back. You've got to walk around with them. You've got to observe it. I also get players to put the GoPro on, even if it's on their bag, so they film their 9, 18 holes when the coach isn't with them, to see if the coach is an influencer, to see if when the coach now isn't there, are they doing the same as when the coach has stood with them? So then they can look at that. The coach can analyze it. The players can analyze it and say, okay, is there a real transfer, or you're only doing it when I'm stood next to you?
I suppose for coaches and their reflective process and helping their players, I would think you've got to take a step back, haven't you? And you've got to look, right, how am I helping this player? With technical, obviously, you'll have biomechanical, potentially on course or range work. What else have I got? Numbers. And then you've got process here. It's a fine line, isn't it? And you've got to be continually reflective on the way you go about things.
Yeah. And also, like many coaches are very passionate. They want to help their athlete, but often you're helping them too much where you're not allowing them to think and reflect. So we're back into that correcting reflex, that writing reflex that is, okay, I know where your problem is. Okay, let me share with you. It's here. So just work on this, or here's something you can work on. And it's that principle of always work on player first, player last with a coach. So always get the player to reflect first. Then if you need any clarity, you can add any texture as a coach. And then near the end, it's always player last. Okay, so what are you going to commit to? What have we agreed? Run that back to me. So now we're hearing the player going, actually, this is what I'm going to do. And the coach steps back. So a lot of this is actually, if we want to develop people that can think for themselves with confidence and competence around different variables and pressures within their sport, we've got to make really sure that we're not helping them too much where we're taking away their ability to make decisions, but also to reflect without the rubbernecking, looking at coach, say, is that all right? Could it be this? Is building that confidence. We go, actually, it's this, or actually, it's nothing, wouldn't change a thing. I don't know. Ignore that. Let's play again, which happens sometimes in golf, right? Sometimes don't overanalyze it. Can't find a solution. No problem. Did I commit? Yeah. Okay. Next time. Let's move on.
Yeah, just keep it nice and simple. And as you say, after all, if it comes down to the back nine of a big tournament, the coach can't make the decisions. It's up to the player. So that makes a lot of sense. I suppose that.
And it's linking in, David, to, as you were mentioning there, I work with Edge Golf College in Portugal, and they've got people like Mark Bull, 3D analysis guy, phenomenal in his field, where, he'll put the suit on you, you'll swing the club, and he can spot literally where your movement patterns are. And then he may spot, actually, there's a limitation biomechanic within your hip. And then it links into here's some exercise you can do, linking with the S&C to go, actually, don't just do some linear work. This player needs to do this as well, keeping the player connected. The technical coach needs to be aware of that as well. So instead of the player going, right, let me see my S&C, let me see my psychologist, let me see my biomechanic, let me see my technical, it's linking them all together. So there's one message, one voice, one support, and not all these people and the players, oh, well, Thingy said this and I need to do this. And you end up with so many changes, nothing gets embedded.
Yeah, no, I've been there when I've worked with tour players who've had confusing messages from different places, and the communication aspect is so important in that. One thing that springs to mind is that, again, with coaches have got to be able to park their own ego to one side, haven't they, and recognize if a player isn't necessarily performing, is that impacting on their own self-worth, and be capable of still backing off, as you say, and letting the player make the decisions.
And that's the same, that action review process, I get the coaches to use it on themselves. So they check. So if I put it in a coaching point of way, imagine now the coach is with a golf player. The coach, before they even start, how's my state? Before they even start the session, what's my ideal self to be a coach right now for this person? So they set that first. Then they go into scanning. Am I looking at all the data now? Am I blinded and I have bias? Am I looking? And then what are my options as a coach before I open my mouth? What are my intervention options? What's going to influence my choice? Okay, I'm deciding to do this. Then they commit to it, whatever intervention it is. That may be a question, maybe a challenge, maybe whatever intervention it is. Then straight away they're reflecting, how did I do? Is there anything I changed? Now, importantly, they now scan for, has it had an impact? So if they've had an intervention with a player, now I've stepped away, I'm now scanning for, is a player now had an influence, a positive influence on that they understand? So it's kind of the action review process I'm asking the coaches to do in the moment for themselves as well, to see, are they making good judgment on their intervention? And then afterwards, how was my intervention in the moment, not even after a session?
So how does that play out then in a team sport? You touched on rugby there. You've worked with a number of rugby clubs. I mean, that must be a lot more complex for a coach, because obviously you've got 20 odd players in front of you.
Yeah, there is pros and cons to it, because when there's more than one player, you don't get caught up within one person where you're looking at overanalyzing everything. So it's always based on, and it goes back to my whole principle is performance as a behavior, not an outcome, is what are the pre-agreed fundamental behaviors that we've agreed as a team? These are our every times. And I always scan for them first. I don't get caught up in a score line. I don't get caught up in a game, whether that's rugby, football, hockey, netball, basketball. I'm looking at how are the every times. If the every times are yes, now I'm looking for, okay, how is their scanning? So I'm now checking players. How is their state scanning? How are their options? How's their execution of the options? How is their reaction after execution? Am I seeing hook-ins, meaningful communication with others after action? Am I seeing a shift in their choices? As a coach, I'm interpreting actually tactically the opposition's made a change. Am I seeing my players now recognizing that and adapting live? So this is the data I'm getting coaches to collect. Now they can go back to the action review process. How's my state? How's the data I'm collecting? What are my intervention options now? Okay, I'm choosing to do this. That may be I'm rotating a player. That may be actually I've got a player who can just shout on the sideline, what are you seeing there? Or Danny, width, whatever it may be. What I want to do is say, look, if my aim is to get them to adapt live, great decision making, am I part of the problem or part of the solution? Am I shouting the solutions at them so much? One, it's going to be out of date. But secondly, now they're going, what does coach want me to do? As opposed to coach is giving me permission with freedom to make judgment based on what I see. And coach will back me on that. So the behavior of the coach, even if it's worded before every match and every week where we go, like, I want you to make decisions for yourself. I'm going to trust you to do that. But then in the pressure of the game, the coach is now shouting and ranting at someone that they think's made a wrong choice. Then you'll shut that down straight away. So back to the state of the coach, the state scanning, the coach looking through what we've pre-agreed and behaviors first, then scanning through the action review process. How's a player's state? How are they scanning? Which often you can definitely see if a player isn't scanning or not. Okay, how are they committing to the choices? What's happening after execution? Am I seeing that adaptation? Yes, no, yes, great, no. Okay, so now what are my interventions? It's kind of the cycle of doing that all the time. Setting up support where if they know there's somebody that can start losing it, caught up in a sideline, give their coaches permission to check and challenge them. So it's keeping them present in those moments. If they feel that they're not sure, sometimes they jump in on decisions. Having a pre-agreement that I'll check with my assistant coach first. I'm thinking of doing this, so they can then give me a bit of a check. Hang on, give them time, whatever it may be. So it's putting in the support structures to help them be successful, but actually giving them a framework for scanning to make better judgment based on honouring the type team they want to build.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of time spent in meetings to plan out a lot of these like key behaviors and the state that coaches want to be in so many different circumstances by the sounds of it. In terms of afterwards and the aftermath of a performance in a team sport, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
Because obviously, dressing rooms can get very emotional by whether it's a win or a loss. What are the principles you teach and get out there to coaches?
All of this, David, we know takes time to embed in a team because they've got their own scoreline success, how many minutes they've played on the, on the pitch, on the court, whatever. So we're fighting with some inbuilt habits here. Also the coach on a scoreline or expectation of an outcome result, all this stuff. So my key thing is always we're reviewing through any match. How are we doing on our every times first? How are we doing on the scanning, the choice, the execution, and reviewing live, the connection of meaningful on court, on pitch. They're my success measures I'm looking at all the time. And I'm getting people to hook in with that data throughout, irrelevant of the scoreline. Then afterwards, I get every coach to do a hot review, which is verbal, not written. So straight away, as soon as they can, I set up WhatsApp groups and Slacks, Microsoft with different teams globally. And they literally, all the coaches are in. Straight away, they say self-state, how was my interventions, choices, how's my interactions, reflecting on coach first, then other coaches, then the team, based on behaviors first, pre-agreed. Every player also does that after a match. So as soon as possible, get on their phone, they do a self-reflection. So we want to get them out the way before we have the group huddle, because as soon as we have the group huddle, we are now influencing people. So then when we ask for an individual reflection, it's already been sabotaged because now many will say what's been said as opposed to their opinion. And part of this is we've got to build the culture. Look, your opinion can't be wrong. It's an opinion. So please share it because it's valued. We can look at the data. You may have missed something. You may have seen something differently to us, but actually now we can look at it, actually your reflection of opinion, but always start with self and always start with our every times, not the scoreline. We ban people from reviewing the scoreline. And it's that honoring. Let's look at the specific details that we set are our measures. I want you to review them, starting with self. And we do that every time. After every practice, coaches do that after every practice, not just the match. In some of my teams, the players also do that after every practice. Depends on where they are on the performance line, obviously, because some aren't with each other twice a day, some obviously 3 days a week, etc. The essence of after a competition, after a match, coaches verbal self-reflect, players verbal self-reflect, everyone listens to each other's before we getting caught up in these group huddles that can influence anyone's reflections. I really want to know what people are thinking before I interfere with it. And that's also the big thing when we're asking golf players or rugby football players to review in practice. I don't want them to wait, coach has pulled me off, what does coach want to hear? We want to build a place where they say, look, talk to me what happened over there. And we want them with freedom to share what they saw, what the options were, and why they made a choice without second guessing what coach wants to hear. And that is really where we really start from building effective reflecting.
You've touched on there, the hot review process there. Would the cold review, would that be the following day when everything's subsided?
Yeah. So cold review depends what's pre-agreed, but it will always be once we calm down. So at least the next day, might be a couple of days later, especially if it's a weekend off. It can be after video or without video. That's if they've got the data. If they've got the data, it's a judgment whether we do, let's have a cold review without looking at the video first, or do the cold review once you've seen a video. We just need to know which one it is. And that's just them now sharing again and saying, now I'm calmed down. Am I still thinking the same as my hot review? And what's so important about that is when they are different, 9 times out of 10, It's the cold review that's the accurate one. So if we can now start saying, well, interestingly, at the time, you didn't think that might influence a work on for that coach or athlete. We're recognizing actually in the moment they're getting caught up in something else. Okay, so that's something that if we can improve in, that's going to help you a better player or coach in the moment making decisions. So then that's giving us some data as well.
You touched there on video, but I'm not going to take you there because I reckon that would take up a podcast in itself. You do get involved with the data analysts and the coaches in that respect as well, yeah.
And you're right, we won't get heavily into it, but there's a big question I always get coaches to ask players until players learn it. When you're looking at a video analysis after match or practice, the question I always ask you is, what are you seeing now based on choice execution that you did not see at the time? Because often we'll get players and coaches that are really good at video analysis and they can tell you, oh, you should stand here, stand here. But actually what I want to know is whether you saw that or didn't see it at the time. The video's up here, you're stood on that court or pitch. If you're not seeing it, that's important for me to be aware of and you to be aware of, because don't get caught up in you should have done this tactic if you didn't see it at the time because where you were stood or you're scanning. We may then spot, actually, I'm good here, but I'm not checking behind me. I can see that on the video, but I didn't see that as an option because I was too busy checking here. That's telling us straight away, well, there's your work on focus right now. So that's always an important question I ask coaches and players to ask themselves.
No, I love that. And as we say, we could talk about that one for a whole podcast, so we'll leave it. Well, Mark, fascinating as always, thoroughly enjoyable, and the listeners will no doubt will get a lot from this. Would you be able to share 3 key takeaways from our conversation for the listeners?
I'd say number 1 is film yourself. Film yourself often enough you forget the camera's on there, whether you're an athlete or you're a coach. It's just giving you the difference between what you think you're doing and how you're interacting with actually what's going on. And just watch it back, listen. Don't get caught up in the technical, tactical. Just listen and watch how you're interacting, what you're seeing on the camera that you may not have seen at the time. That's number 1. Number 2, understand what the fundamental behaviors are that are important to you as a coach and as a team that's going to allow you to be successful. Call them the every times if you like. Know what they look like, put tangibles on them, get everyone to see the value of that, and then honor them by always scanning for them first. And the third one is always find a way to search for the source of an issue. Don't just go for your gut reaction of it was a tactical thing or it was a technical thing, therefore my investment needs to be there. Find a way to identify where is the source of the issue. When you know that, put the interventions in there, always with the focus of making yourself redundant. Always a focus of don't tell someone the answer if you want them to work it out for themselves.
Yeah, a big part of this is being honest with yourself, isn't it? And being comfortable in facing some awkward moments and coming up against difficult emotions, if you like. It's the only way you learn, essentially.
That's the biggest thing, isn't it, Dave? For an athlete and for a coach, the biggest point is that when you recognize you need to change is really embracing the fact of when you change, your performance potentially is going to drop. You're going to be clunky. You may not be as swift. What you're seeing in outcome may be a regression to what you normally do. But if you really see the value of the change, stay on it, work through it, because you're going to come out the other end higher. And don't give up just because it's awkward. Understand it's just a new skill. You're just building a new skill, but be okay with that. That's so important for everyone.
Yeah, because there is that danger in sport, again, where results come top priority and you become very reactive, which is not ideal, to say the least. Well, as I say, fantastic, Mark. A big thank you. Would you like to direct the listeners to your website, social media, so they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, everything is PDS Coach, so Papa Delta Sierra Coach. Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, they're all those. The website is pdscoach.com. There's my automated online course now, which shares over 100 hours of all this as a resource, tutorials, examples. But also there's where you can get hold of me to do live consultancy and supporting as well. Business, sport, any level.
Fabulous. Again, a big thank you, Mark. Well, that conversation didn't disappoint. It certainly gave me food for thought, took me back to this whole thing about focusing on the process, about task versus ego. I see it so often that the ego gets in the way, that the result, the outcome gets in the way. So really what I'd like you just to consider now is the conversations that you're having with yourself and with other people. If you're a coach, with your athletes, if you're a support staff member, the conversations you're having with athletes, if you're a parent, the conversations that you're having with your children, are they outcome based? And see if you can fit some of Mark's methodology into the way you communicate so that you're helping people focus on the process and on the task in hand. Some food for thought there for you. If you want to learn more and get more insights, please do sign up to the Mental Edge newsletter, which is very, very comprehensive to say the least, where on a weekly basis I share a whole host of resources which often do link to focusing on the process. Have a fantastic week ahead. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sport psychology resources. The Sport-Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.